Hello and welcome to another episode of Five Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green. Happy to be here with you and happy to have you here with us. And I am thrilled that I sent out a second invitation to our guest for today. His first podcast with us in spring of 23 just shot the stats all over the place because it was a great discussion about hiring based on character, not just paperwork, character. And that a lot of people heard that, watched it, and felt that it was a really valuable podcast to them. And my guest coming back is Chief Dave Robertson. He is the fire chief of Fort Frances Fire Department in Ontario, Canada. He has over 25 years in the fire service in 5 different departments, from busy urban systems to wildland to rural, semi-rural. He has instructed within his fire departments in fire academies, paramedic schools, private fire institutions, and is now the chief of the Fort Frances Fire Department. He is fueled by a sincere passion to make the fire service better, which today includes talking to his classes about his own struggles with PTSI or PTSD. He hopes that by being open to recruits right at the front end of their career about this very real threat, that each recruit will be able to have a long and joyful and healthy career. Chief, it's a pleasure to welcome you back again. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. And that was such an interesting introduction because it's been, I think we're nudging up on a year and a half to 2 years since we last spoke. And I think when I provided you that bio originally, I was kind of on a PTSD trying to share my story kick. I had totally forgotten about it. It doesn't make it less important, of course, and not necessarily what we're talking about today. But it was it's always funny, I think, when you hear your own bio and you hear something that that you didn't quite remember yourself. So thanks for including that part, and thanks for pulling up that older bio. I think it's still incredibly valuable. We were talking off camera about this and how it's, we're trying, but it's not getting necessarily better. It is both a complicated and complex, the two different things, issue, right? So thanks for including that. I appreciate it.
Well, I always want to introduce my guests to our viewers and listeners, because just saying, hi, this is Firefighter Bob. Let's get into it, talking about how to decorate a fire hydrant when you're taking kids around the fire. That's not it. It's probably a nice thing to do for kindergarten and first and second graders. I know that my grandson, who's just 3 years and 4 months old, is now all, quote unquote, from a term that I learned about in North Carolina when I was there, eat up with it. So I took him to the firehouse down the street initially when he was 2, just over 2, and he wouldn't get up on the truck. And he loved fire trucks. He already talked about them already. And he loved it, but he wouldn't do it. Now he has a bunch of toys at home. He has all my fire apparatus toys and everything from the Hess fire ladder truck to all sorts of toys. And he loves it. And he says, I said to him, what does the fire engine make when it comes by? He goes, whoa, 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 whoa. I said, yeah, those are the old ones. The real fire trucks have, because
Yeah.
there's nothing better than a cue. I'm sorry. And yet in my department in North Carolina, the chief wouldn't put a cue on because he was afraid that the generator or the alternator would burn out. And I said, Chief, Boston, Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, they all use cues. You think they're afraid of them, burning out? Because if they do, they have the people to come in and change it out for them. But I think, as you said, firefighters and police for a long time, and now deservedly so, our brothers and sisters in EMS are getting a lot more airtime, let's say. And our children should not learn from the newscasts in the community. They should learn from the firefighters, law enforcement, and EMS people. That's where they learn to understand and respect who we are and what we do. And that we don't have to go into any gross details, but we have to let them know sometimes our work is very difficult for us to do.
Yeah, it is. In the words of Heather Marquez, who's just a fantastic person. We wear these cool uniforms, and we shop a brand a little bit by going around to podcasts, whatnot, to try to share our story. Most of us do it. I would like to believe for altruistic reasons, but there's all this, and then in the background we've got Chicago fire going on and all that kind of stuff. But really, we're street janitors, right? We clean up the messes,
Right.
and sometimes literally. So yeah, I think that level of honesty is incredibly important. And
Right.
and who best to get an honest story from than the people that are actually doing it?
Right. And
Yeah.
to talk to kids who have not been jaded one way or another. Hopefully these kids at those ages are still fresh. They're
Hmm.
still hungry to learn. And yes, we have to gear it to hungry at their age level. We have to design our presentations to meet their what they can understand, and not start telling them about, well, we usually use 5 milligrams. What is that going to mean to a kid? But if we show them our gear, if we just don't let them touch it unless you've got new gear yet, just don't let them touch your gear, please. But we're fighting that battle too. The state of Massachusetts just last week was the first state where the entire state government came together and outlawed PFOS in any fire gear and anything whatsoever in the state of Massachusetts. It is done there. And Mass is a little, that's where I grew up. That's where I was born. And it's a relatively small state, all in all. But the fact is that they had the cojones, we'll say politely, to get together, put partisan politics aside, and come together for the men and women of fire, EMS, and police, and the people, the citizens of the state of Massachusetts. And we need more. We need that to be an example to our countries, USA and Canada. We should be passing it on to the people that we work with in South America, in Europe, Australia, and Asia. We all need to show the manufacturers that, no, we're not going to believe your lies anymore. We have a job to do, and you're hindering us from doing that job. So that's what I find important, and that's why I believe so much in education. Yes, I've been an educator since the age of 13, but needless to say, I think we all agree, and I'd say even rank and file members, not just officers or chiefs, I think we all agree that we need to better educate the public, not just kids, public, about who we are and what we do. We're not just the funny red truck that goes down with a little siren and flashing lights on it.
And we're getting there. We're definitely getting there, especially in the the more honest news stories and through great, like we were mentioning Corey Pern and Crackle magazine, and so you get a great magazine like that. It's high quality. It's now getting great distribution. So good honest vehicles like that. Then that's actually one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of Hollywood and what they do for police. I don't quite know because I'm not a cop.
Right.
I feel like there may have been some vehicles or some movies that maybe touched a more authentic note about being a police officer, but I have yet to really see anything on fire. And the current spate of fire shows that are out there, they're almost embarrassingly bad.
Yeah, I found that the first show that got me interested, of course, was Emergency. Okay,
Yeah.
and although I wasn't planning to be a firefighter, but I was enthralled with that show, especially when I learned that every story on
emergency was vetted through LA County Fire. Yeah, and Brian Page as well. Brian Page, he was in a battle with the medical authorities in that area. They were largely based, if I'm correct, out of Daniel Freeman Hospital, which I don't think is around anymore, but it was one of the fledgling programs.
Harborside Hospital.
It's Harborside, okay.
And I think you're talking about Jim Page.
Jim, sorry, not Dave.
That's okay. I was just trying to think if there was something.
I know a Brian Page. That's why Jim Page, James O. Page.
Exactly.
Right. And he would be butting up against the authorities wanting certain things to be done on the street or allowed or trained on. And as a technical advisor on emergency, he would actually have them do what was needed within this Hollywood scripted, produced scenario, and then essentially play that scenario to show them how it could play out. And so a lot of the things that Johnny and Roy were doing on emergency were happening in the show before they were happening in the street.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was interesting.
Yeah, that is. I was just going to add that there are only two shows now that I believe are as close to realistic as we can see, and that is Emergency. I did not watch Chicago Fire after the premiere episode. Mm-hmm. I recorded it because I was out of town, and I come home to play it, and I see this very open. The engine company is going all the way up the driveway. The ladder truck is going all the way up the driveway to the house and starts now. You're not seeing any or hearing anybody else, and they're starting to put the ladder against on the A side. And now the battalion chief shows up, parks 3 miles away from the house on the longest driveway ever created in the world, supposedly. And he just reaches in and he says, "Oh, we got a full involvement. No 360, no nothing." And then the guy with a couple of years on his belt is bringing a probie up the ladder. Now, the only thing that was accurate on that first episode was the way special effects created the breathing of the smoke. And that's hard to do, because that's what we see when we have a backdraft. We don't have enough oxygen there. And so he says to the probie, he says, "All right, when I tell you to just push that pike pole through the window." And I said, "No, they're not going to have him do that." And sure enough, they did. We had a full backdraft explosion. The rookie, the new kid, dead on arrival on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just after that, only a couple of episodes later, the what I heard and read was that the Chicago Fire chief rank of some kind walked away from the set. He says, "This isn't firefighting. This is Hollywood."
Yeah.
He says, "We're off. You're going to do what you, but it's not going to be through us."
Much like Cal Fire, and I forget the name of the show, but it has to do with wildland fire and wildland firefighters. And it was so bad that Cal Fire put out a press release,
I saw that,
and a communique to the general public, basically saying, "We are absolutely disavowing any connection with that show because it's that bad."
Right.
So and the sad part about that is that it's actually shot in Vancouver, in British Columbia, in Canada. Because it looks like the woods and it looks like areas of California, because there's a lot of similarities. And the technical advisor, I don't know his name. Even if I did, I wouldn't name him, because it's not about shaming anybody. But either they've got a Vancouver City firefighter trying to guide Cal Fire operations for a show, and that's not his fault, or he actually is trying and providing the right information, and they're disregarding whatever's going on with that. But
the other one,
how, Steve, did we end up down this rabbit hole?
I know. Well, that's because
I'm wondering if your listeners are wondering, what are they talking about today?
Well, you know what? All this is coming back to what we want to talk about today.
Okay.
And that's number one. And maybe we talk about these old shows, whether you like them or not.
Uh-huh.
But what you want to talk about, and I think it's so important today. I think this is the most important time for this, getting back to basics.
Hmm.
And we have all these new tools and we have all these new appliances and like that. But if we don't know what we're doing and begin at the basics, when I teach my adult students, and I teach them you got to practice on this side to learn the reading, because everything you need is going to be there. And then you're going to go to the left side of the page where you just have the consonants and no vowels. And this is, I'm sorry, in Hebrew language.
Okay.
And sometimes, so what they do then sometimes is a couple of my older guys, they don't want to spend that time. So they'll read the notated side and then they start working on the other side and it becomes a failure because they didn't prepare themselves. They didn't want to take the time to do the basics first. And this is just volunteering to read the scrolls at a synagogue. That's what it is. So there's no payment involved or anything, but I keep trying to tell them that if we don't know the basics, no matter what your heart desires and how ready your brain is, if you don't follow the methodology, it just may not work. And we've seen that. And I think we've seen that here in what the service that you and I love, that there are a lot of people who want to be the rookie on that first day. And 3 months later, they think this should be elevated to a lieutenant.
Hmm.
Okay. That's not basics. I spent probably as a volunteer, but I spent a lot of time at the firehouse since it was so close to our apartment. I would spend probably at least try to squeeze in at least 3 hours every day. And that one was my lunch hour. So when I was out for lunch from the office where I worked at the synagogue, I'd eat at the firehouse. And the couple of the caretakers who were wonderful, they would take me and my buddy who I met when we joined that fire department. And he would take us under wing and tutor us. And, he made us go through, you need to know the whole left side, all the left side cabinets on the engine. Steve, you got to work on the right side cabinets on the snorkel. We did every time we were there. Again, even eating a meal, we talk about something, and then we're out on the floor outside on the apron, learning and being shown stuff and taking. I took notes. I mean, this is 77. We didn't have even mini tape recorders in those days. Certainly no electronic recording, and so I kept notes. I used little pads like these.
Yep.
Notepads to keep track of everything. And I used them I created them as my study guide. So how do you think, let's talk about how do you think let's talk about getting back to basics in general, and then maybe
Well,
get to how now as a chief of department, how you see implementing that philosophy, which I think is imperative.
well, it is. It is imperative, right? Because basics equate to foundation. And just like any good structure, if you've got a strong foundation, there's a lot you can do on that foundation, right?
Right.
So if you are foundationally strong, you go to an emergency scene and you get met with, as we do in this business, with a different weird situation almost every time. It allows you the agility to utilize that foundation, stand on that strong foundation, but be able to mitigate the problem in front of you. Basics really equates to foundation, but it's interesting is that this is kind of getting to be a bit of a hot button term. We've got to get back to basics. There's a very, very good article series up here in Canada written by Mark Vanderfeist. He also writes for Fire Engineering as well, and it's titled "Back to Basics." But then I'll ask, well, what does that mean? Well, the basics. It's almost like the character thing from the first, what do you mean by good character? Well, somebody just kind of gives you a good feeling. I think there's an accuracy to that, sort of. But, so when we talk about basics, well, what do you mean? Well, ladders and hose. Okay, well, what do you mean by ladders and hose? Are we talking about 2.5 inch, inch and a half versus 3 inch and 3/4?
Or,
Are we talking about how you load it? Are you talking about how it deploys because you've got a dog's breakfast of a load of high volume 5 inch hose because you just were all too lazy, right? Well, when we say hose, we're talking about moving hose. Okay, moving hose, charged, not charged, up a ladder? Are we talking into a hallway? Are we talking about off a standpipe? We're talking about 3 doors. We're talking about a 2-man team or a 4-man team. So I think back to basics has become kind of a garbage term for more of a want to get back to foundation, right? However that looks. And that's going to look different for the person working in town ABC versus XYZ, right? Town ABC, it's a town of 15,000 people. They're all 1- and 2-story structures. It's all post-war stuff, right? And then town XYZ is somewhere out, one of the beautiful suburbs of Dallas. These 3- and 4-story McMansions and foyers that are bigger than the college that I first went to, right? That sort of thing. So back to basics is going to look different. You can't say I just want to get back to basics. Let's throw ladders. Yeah, that's actually very good, and we can definitely talk about that, Steve, in this. And there are definitely some basics. There is definitely kind of a grocery list of basics, but I challenge people that say that. I especially challenge chiefs or training officers that say we've just got to get back to basics to then actually noodle that for a bit, right? Chew on that for a bit, sift through the dust up here a little bit, and really ask yourself, what does basics mean to us? Is basics addressing a gap that we've got in training? If we haven't touched ladders for a year and ladders are basics, okay, well now, that's definitely going to be on that list of our basics.
sure.
So I think we need to be careful to not just throw the term out, get charged up by it, because like a lot of things that you falsely get charged up about, it'll fall flat, right? It won't be. You're not framing what it is that you need to train on. You're not talking about what needs to be trained on. You're not coming up with any sort of a defined plan, within a defined time frame, things that are achievable and measurable. You're just kind of saying this thing, or sometimes even worse, and this is actually a little bit of a different subject, so I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but is this common complaint right now? Is the kids these days don't know basics. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, they're just on their phones. Okay, well, what are the basics? Swinging a hammer. Okay, well, why is swinging a hammer important in the fire service? And I agree with a lot of that, by the way. We're the generation that actually handed the kids these phones. It's our fault, right?
Right.
We're the generation that said we want everything faster, more productive, easier. I want more stuff. It's that joke. I'm just reaching for my phone. It's that joke by the comedian who talks about where they moved from a Sony Walkman to where we're at now, and we basically demanded I want all my music on one device. No, wait, that's a mistake. I want all of the music on one device, right? So we've created that monster a little bit.
Oh, yes.
But back to what I was saying is, we charge these kids, and I say kids, 19, 22, 25. We charge these people that are just coming into the fire service with this, you don't know the basics, we've got to get back to basics. And then the conversation stops. And I don't think that, from the senior firefighter on up to the chief, I don't think that shows any sound leadership, guidance, mentorship. I think it's just a term that falls flat.
Right. Right. And I think, when they first come in as a rookie, we don't seem to have any problem teaching them uh, some of our firehouse duties that they don't see, and a little bit that is a little bit of hazing, but it's, you can't take that too far. You have to understand that, well, yes, we are a family, but this is the new person who just walked in the door yesterday for the first time. This is his or her second day. You can't start hazing them on this first or second day.
Right.
That's not the way a professional fire department. I don't mean professional by who gets paid and who's a volunteer. I'm talking about we all, no matter what we do, we're career, we're volunteer, part paid, WUI, we have to be right every single time. We don't have the choice of, oh, that didn't work, let's try this instead. Because if we waver in front of the people we're teaching, then we're not getting the educational point across to them. So they're going to walk out of that class and saying, you know what he talked about? I have no idea. And that means there's a whole hour, 2 hours lost, both for the instructor and for the attendees. They got nothing out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of a fundamental point about being a sound instructor or a sound training officer, is being highly prepared. You need to be, in my opinion, you need to be, if not operationally proficient, you should be shooting for operational excellence. As a training officer, you should be very, very, very good at what you do. And then in developing a lesson plan, you should be very, very informed on what it is you're going to be delivering. And then ultimately you need to be very prepared and very knowledgeable in order to deliver that subject matter properly. But that's one of the fundamentals of I think being a sound instructor or a sound training officer. But that does go back to the basics, right?
Exactly.
We're in an age where there are some wildly intelligent fire service personnel out there who are offering up some great classes, no question. But I almost wonder, and just for your viewers, so this is a very organic conversation. For those of you who don't know, I actually, Steve and I admitted I'm shooting from the hip on this one. So I'm kind of noodling a lot of this as it comes out. And part of that is, we've got all these kind of nebulous ideas floating around out there in the fire service right now. As sound as the instructors are, and as important as they can be, I think that might be some of the frustration in the fire service that has people saying, we got to get back to basics, right? It's because because we're spending 4.5 hours on whether or not the smoke coming from the second floor of that go, no go exercise that we're doing, is it green or is it gray green? If it's gray green, well, maybe it's oxygen deficient. But if it's really green, it could, okay, very important, no question, right? But there's a frustration around, we're doing that. And then I'll come in, for example, as a chief, and I'll say, so when was the last time you threw ladders? And people's eyes will cross. Right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of back to my initial back to basics idea. I think you need to know what that means, define it. A lot of that does land on a chief in a smaller department or on the training officer. Hopefully, even a small department has somebody that's very defined in that training position.
Right.
So yeah.
And in my first department in North Carolina, the support, my buddy had ran a few calls with Hyattsville Rescue in Maryland, but he was just 18 when I met him. So that was just that previous time before that fall that he had done that. But the chief was so into his people, because everybody was a volunteer except for the chief, the captain, the mechanic, the secretary, and the 3 caretakers. Each one of those caretakers worked one day on, 24, then 48 off, because their responsibility was to get the main first apparatus out the door. Maybe they can fill it with people who were just hanging around that day, or when we get called in, if it was close enough to where I was working and I wasn't teaching a class, I was just doing office work. Yeah, I'd leave the office and go down and try to get on one of the apparatus to answer the call, because midday calls are very difficult. This is already back 77, 78. Today's volunteer or even, part volunteer they're having a lot of problems. We know that. But, it's funny, we've spoken about this, I think, before, is that here in the Northeast, we have Chief Anthony Correa, who is both.
Yeah, I know Tony.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So kind of guy he is.
Great. He was my first mentor out of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors, the ISFSI. He's been a huge help to me.
Oh, he's very good. And I was asking him about one of his interviews. I asked him about the concept of we were going to make it the discussion about recruitment and retention. And Tony said to me, he goes, "Hey, Steve, it's got to be retention and then recruitment." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because if you can't keep the people you got, you ain't going to bring anybody new in." And I said, "What's it?" God, that makes sense. And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
If we have people trying to get ahead of each other, get out the door to leave, how is anybody going to want to say, "I want to join"?
Yeah.
Because everybody's leaving that department. Why isn't everybody leaving? So we got to take care of the people we have, because then they can become part of our recruitment. They can say to a friend, "Hey, we've talked about this. You've had some interest. We have a drill tonight. Why don't you come by? Just be a guest. That's all. Watch us see what we do." And that, according to Chief Correa, he says that is a very workable position to be in, because this way you have people who know what they need to do first to make the department better. And that means keeping the people who are in the department now happy, satisfied. Whether you're career or volunteer, he says it doesn't make any difference. We all have the same responsibilities. We got to keep the number of people working for us at a very safe level, and we don't want to wind up losing so many people that we can hardly respond with more than one apparatus. So I think there's a lot to be said about all these little steps that can take us back to basics. And just as Chief Correa says it, first thing you have to start, if you want to grow your department, you have to know how to keep the people you have. No, they're not going to be happy at every call or every decision that a chief officer makes, or even a line officer. But they're going to know that there's leadership that cares about them and wants to help them grow and learn to be the best firefighter they possibly can be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
when is a firefighter happiest after a call? It's the call that goes very well. And the call that goes well tends to be things like timing, right? We are expeditious in getting there, good sound decision making, both at the aerial leadership command level and at the task level and everywhere in between. Making sound, fast, effective decisions is another reason why they're happy. But being able to do those things, to be able to be effective and fast in that time compressed, high consequence arena, you've got to have that foundation. You've got to have those foundational basics. So I mean, a happy firefighter coming away from calls is, there's nothing better, like Anthony Correa said, it's basically, there's nothing better than a walking billboard.
Right.
And so somebody's actually saying this is fantastic. You should see us at calls. We are busting this out. It feels good. We know we're doing well by our citizens. The team is really cohesive, sound communication, because it's easy, because we know what we're all talking about. You can't do that without having that foundation of basics.
Right.
So really, it's funny because we're talking about retention. I think a key retention issue, we keep throwing money at them. right? You want more money, and here's a signing bonus, and here's a tax break, and we won't give you one T-shirt, we'll give you 3 T-shirts and a hoodie and a hat. People don't want more; they want different. People don't want more; they want better. And I think one of the elements of better is a high level of engagement in training because that ends up playing out on the street,
Right.
right? They feel comfortable doing what they're doing, even in those oh crap kind of situations. We know this team's going to handle it. This guy's going to handle it. This girl's going to handle it. You can't do that without basics. So it's funny you even talk about retention. I think back to basics even applies there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
like you said, we don't need baubles and bangles to bring in a person interested in becoming a firefighter or a law enforcement officer or EMS. Listen, all these jobs, these 3 career paths that we're talking about, none of them are easy. None of them are easy.
No.
And basically it's because we can have a lot of great calls, expeditious calls. We saved somebody. We started a heart. Nothing that gets you off standing about 3 inches above the ground is when you've been able to resuscitate a person who is in
Absolutely.
full arrest. But the fact is that you're not going to attract them with baubles and bangles. If they want to be a firefighter, they want to be a firefighter, and they know what a firefighter looks like. They've seen either on the news or they've watched in the community. They see, and they said, you know what? I would like to do this. I can help my community, help my own family because I live here. Uh, this is what I want to do. I want to do it. I want to do it right. And if you give them that, you're building you're starting at the building blocks and building onto that, as
Mhm.
opposed to falling, you're 3/4 of the way up and then a whole bunch of crap happens. And then you're starting to scratch. All of a sudden you have people walking away. Your pool of applicants dries up and you go, they wave it away with, these kids, they don't know what they want anyway in today's day. That's
Right.
not
These,
true.
yes, they do. They're, I was never in the military, but somebody that I think a lot of us actually in the fire service look up to is Admiral William McRaven. Right, he's the gentleman who wrote "Make Your Bed" was the original speech, and then he wrote the book beyond that, and just a brilliant person in terms of leadership. And he specifically addresses this issue where we're saying kids these days, they don't understand, they don't know. There's no, they don't learn hands on. They're just living on their phones, and it's right. They just don't have the caliber, they don't have the stuff,
Right.
right? Like that old movie, the right stuff,
Right.
that great astronaut movie, having the right stuff. And here's a guy, hardened warrior, Navy SEAL, who rose to the very, very top of special forces. Um, and he's telling us, no, actually, you're wrong. I've seen these kids from the day that they sign up, with their bad haircuts and wearing their dad's suit, uh, on up to seeing them in their first firefight. And he said, we have absolutely got it wrong. So yeah, I've never quite bought into the idea that today's generation they don't know. Yeah, no, they know different,
Yeah.
right? They know different. I would warrant a guess they're actually hungrier for knowledge than we ever were.
I would agree because when I just went down that station one day right around the corner from our apartment the day after we moved in. I was going to go to the grocery store. And I came down the road and I see this brick building and the rear bay doors were up. And I'd done that all through Greater Boston growing up as a kid. Even when I was I had my bike riding, I would do it as far as I could go with that. Then when I got my license, I was all over Greater Boston visiting firehouses. Not that I planned to be a firefighter. I admired them so much, having seen my first firefighter in person right at my home when I was 7 years old.
Hmm.
So to me, that's what I loved doing with them, and that's why I love visiting. It was only by chance that the captain said to me, "Oh, by the way, the chief's here. He'd like to meet you." I said, and I'm still in a suit from work. And I said, "No, you don't have to bother the chief." He goes, "No, no, he's not bothered. He wants to see you." So he came and he brought me to his office. Oh, here's our thunderstorm starting again here in South
Oh,
Florida.
you got some storms going. Oh yeah, that's right. You're in Florida in the summertime.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he said, "Nice to meet you, sir. You're a college graduate." I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "What college?" I told him Brandeis, and he goes, "Well, I've heard a lot of things. I don't know anybody who went there until I meet you now, but," he goes, "I've heard very good things about those big universities in the greater Boston area." I said, "Well, thank you, sir." And he said, "I just want you to, I want you to know that your fire department is always right here since you live so close." So, and then he said, "But you know what?" He says, "I want you to take this envelope and read it through and see if you have any interest in what's on there." And he said to me, and I mentioned this in one of the earlier podcasts this season, he says, "But Mr. Green," and he uses his little Southern drawl, "if you plan on being a firefighter with us, you better step one or two steps closer to your razor blade." And I said, "What do I got to shave my beard for? What does that have to do with firefighting?" And the captain, like he was standing by in off curtain, comes in with a mask, and he says, he goes, "Hold it against your face." So I did. He goes, "Now take a breath." And
Yeah.
I did. I said, "So what's the problem?" He says, "Most of that air you were breathing in was never going inside you, and then you were breathing it out." He says, "Because the mask doesn't have a seal on your face, on your skin." He says, "You have to be clean shaven as a firefighter." And so for the rest of those 4 years that I was there, well, yeah, when I opened up the envelope, it turned out it wasn't something for me to read other than the fact it was an application to the department.
That was sly. That was
It was
sly.
sly, yeah. But he was a terrific chief. He would sit down and talk with anybody who needed to talk with him. He would always make time for you. He would guide you. He sent my buddy and me and our mentor, one of the paid guys who took good care of my buddy and me. And he sent us to these 3 state fire schools that occurred every late spring, early summer. And we kept asking, what? And the first time he asked us to go, I said, "Why? We're brand new. We're not even here a year, Chief." He says, "No, I want you 2 boys to go, and Roger's going to go with you." And didn't know. And we always talked about that. Never after we couldn't stay the 4th year. Rich had taken a job with Metro PD in Washington, D.C., and I got hired up in the Syracuse area. But I got to see him back in 2017 again. And we went in after we talked outside. It was a hot summer day, and he said, "Come on, we'll have sweet tea." His wife always made sweet tea at the firehouse for us and stuff like that. And he sits back like he was like a gin and tonic, but it was just a sweet tea. He said, "Did you boys ever wonder why I sent you to the State Fire College?" I said, "Chief, every single time that Rich and I speak on the phone or we're visiting each other, we always ask, what the hell was he doing? Why did he send us? We were the rookies." And he says, "Well, I'll tell you why. That's why I was so disappointed when you boys left." He says, I was angry, but I knew I shouldn't be angry. I was just disappointed because I was making you 2 boys new captains of, if you have gotten that your last summer," he says, "would have been officer training. And I was going to point you, the 2 of you, because you guys have real heads on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And you might be volunteers, but I know that you act professionally."
Yeah.
And, Rich, when I got home and I told Rich about that, he was just flabbergasted, and he never shared it with us, but it meant even that much more when we found out about it so many years later. And he was just a real down to earth, Southern chief who really cared about his community and his firefighters.
Yeah.
And, I wish we could duplicate people like that.
They're out there.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're out there.
they are definitely out there. And I think if there's one thing that this sort of cultural push towards sort of a more analytical take on leadership, the need for sound leadership, training up on it, not saying I'm a good leader, but actually saying I'm a student of leadership. By culturally moving away from so I became a captain, so now I'm in a position of leadership. No, you're in a position of authority, which is different than leadership. And I think all of those things have us moving in a very good way towards having a bunch of chiefs like the gentleman that you spoke about, right? Having some vision for you, guiding you, pushing you out of your comfort zone a little bit, being kind as well. It's not you're not a lot of chiefs that invite people to sit on their porches to have sweet tea, to tell you the truth. I just kind of contradicted, I think, what I was trying to say. There didn't used to be. I think we're moving towards people more like that, where people that are leaders, which that's regardless of rank, they are becoming more engaged. And they're becoming kinder. They're understanding the importance of empathy. And the importance of sound training. Right? It's so yeah. We're kind of back to the beginning of this whole conversation.
Right.
I think.
But you
Yeah.
also in your bio, I think, and this comes back to what we just talked about, is we know that this job is not an easy job. As much as we love it, there are times that we detest it. I wish I didn't have to go on that call. It was horrible. And yes, it can affect us, especially those with a lot of years under their belt. And sometimes it could be just one exposure to something terrible that tilts that issue. And I think it's important that we also realize that PTSI, PTSD are not just the acronyms of the day. These are real situational instances where our brothers and sisters have been working a certain amount of time. They've seen a lot of the great stuff that we do as fire and rescue personnel, and we've also all gone through the terror of losing a victim. And it could be a bad accident that we didn't even have a chance to do anything to help them. It could be anything that, depending on that person's individual's makeup, this is not something that's contagious. This is how each of us sees the world through our own eyes. And sometimes, especially if you're a high traffic area with a lot of really grisly situations, anywhere from car accidents to gunshots, stabbings, we see it all. And we don't want others who are not in this, what we do, we don't want them to have to see that. And that's what's very important, is that, while we revel after we have a good darken on a house fire, we darken it down really well, and everybody's slapping their backs because we did a good job. Everybody was safe. We got the pets out. Everything was done, and we were able to put on the tarps real fast and be able to save most of their furniture and things like that. But that can be 25 minutes later. You're just backing into the bay again. You get another dispatch, and now you hear it's 3-car collision. 1 car is overturned. 1 car is on its side, and 2 people were ejected from the car. Just the fact when you're putting your butt in that chair on the apparatus, this is not going to be a picnic.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think we have to realize today that the Behavioral Health Initiative is not the same days back in my day, suck it up.
Right.
And
that wasn't that long ago.
That do that. Yeah.
There are still departments that do that. And thankfully we're moving away from that. But just as a general take on things, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, I started not that long ago. And when I did start, for whatever reason, I had a string of really bad calls that involved people dying and destabilizing with our crew. So I quickly got the nickname Toe Tag. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because it was funny back then, to kind of take this new kid and to give him this dark moniker. Um, but that was part of the suck it up culture. That was only 25 years ago,
Yeah.
when I was starting. So, well, a little more than 25. We'll call it. I'm probably going to hang on that 25 number for a few years. I
I,
don't think
I,
I think I'm at 27 and change
I
is
think
where
I've been out longer than you've been in.
but it's funny we keep talking about basics, and you were talking about I'm going to talk this is a bit of a subject change, but it's something that is near and dear to me, and I'm still surprised at how few people do it really very properly. So you're talking about how we would finish out a fire and we're patting each other on the back and we darkened that down well, and we actually had, it was good property save, and we saved a lot of stuff in the house. And we pat ourselves on the back, and we just kind of walk away from it. And I firmly believe, and I was talking earlier about some special forces stuff. I admit I am not special forces, never been trained in it. But one of the things that they do very, very well is an after action report. And part of that after action report is being absolutely honest. There's the show Ted Lasso. Right? A lot of people, I don't know if you've watched it. I'm sure a lot of your viewers have. And he talks about those really tough and awkward conversations, and you can sense that there's a load of BS being thrown around. And I think he was talking specifically about him and his wife at the time, but he uses it in his life. Says as soon as you say the safe word, Oklahoma, that meant you had to. It was a rule. You had to be brutally honest. So if you go into an AAR, an after action report, with that sort of Oklahoma mindset, um, uh, I still remember some of the ones that I went on. I can see us in front of a whiteboard. I was like, well, yeah, you did that well, man. Yeah, yeah. And engine two, you spotted the area, so you had room for the truck. Yeah, yeah, it was good, and this was good, and this was good. Where can we get better? Right? Is there any issues around speed? Getting water, laddering the building. Did we get on ventilation well enough? Is anybody checking in on command? Right? Is any who's really being critical of command? I know that I don't get it much. I wish I did. The department that I'm at right now, I especially think of a couple of members. They have no problem calling me out, which is great. I love that. I want to be held accountable. I want to do better in every single call. But back to the basics idea. I think that one of the we were talking about at the start of this, back to the basics. What does that mean beyond just ladders and hoses and just
Right.
throwing that out? Well, I think one of the basics, I think in that list of basics that every department needs to have is a sincere, robust, maybe even brutally raw. I shouldn't say the word brutally, but I think you get the sense of an after action report. The pats on the back are nice. They're important, but they will not help us grow, and they will not help us achieve what is ultimately our mission, which is protecting the citizens of the town that we've sworn to protect.
I
So
am.
that should be fitted.
I'm glad you brought that up. Um, in my first department, in my last year there, um, they I had already had I started a video business with the very first portable Panasonic
Mm-hmm.
recorders, cameras, and stuff in those days. And this was late '77, and I did weddings, I did bar mitzvahs, I did depositions for a couple of attorneys from the synagogue uh, when they needed it, and got it. I got the sealer and the way to put the what it called, so it's a seal on it to make sure. And so the chief had asked me, he goes, I know you do a lot of work with video, but what could you do for us? I said, well, you'd have to, get a little bit more if you're going to do that, because my stuff is not built for heavy roads torn up because it's on a big wagon that I had to put everything on there. I could carry the portable long, but the battery and that portable VHS was maybe 18 minutes if it was a good day.
Hmm.
But I said to him, I said, if we set the department up with a small system, you could have someone designated who could um, be a videographer on scene. Um, they can wear fire gear, but they're not going to go into onto the scene itself. They're not going to get engaged into the scene. But then you can bring the video back to the station, and after everybody washes up and everything, sit down, you watch it, and you critique what did you do? What's on that video? And he said, "That's a great idea,
Hmm.
and do it." Well, I started working on it, and then all of a sudden, another firefighter in the department, who was also a police officer, um, said, "I don't know about Steve, but I can get you something for a good price." And the chief said, "Well, I talked to Steve first, and it was his idea, basically." Um, he says, "Yeah, but he's going to charge you an arm and a leg. I'll get a really dirty bottom price for you." And that's what they did. So when that happened, since it was in the last quarter, I was there. I said, Chief, I said, I'm glad you have, he goes, I didn't mean to, I said, Chief, you don't have to answer to me. Just you do what's right for the department. That's what's more important to me.
Yeah.
You picked Tommy, fine, let Tommy do it. Then when I moved up to upstate New York and I got injured, so I suggested to them, I said to the chief, we could put together a small video unit, put it in the heavy rescue. It'll trickle charge there all the time. And then I said, I can come up, you let me keep my pager. I'll come up and I'll shoot if it's something worthwhile.
Hmm.
Or you call me if it started fine and it's going to hell in a handbasket. I said, call me out and I'll do it. And he said, but so what do we do with that afterwards? Is it to watch TV? No, it's to learn from what we saw happen at that call. And he didn't get it until it was a freezing February night. It was about 1:15 in the morning. We had a big house fire, very nice section of our district, and really, as we say in Boston, really wicked fire. And I got paged out, drove up there in the other vehicle, and shot from all angles. Shot the line officers doing their work, the other chiefs working there and stuff like that. Got it all that, and uh, edited the tape, gave it to the chief, and he said, "What am I supposed to do with that?" I said, "Learn." He goes, "What do you mean learn?" I said, "Chief, the video player is right. I set it up right by the TV, so all you got to do is put the cassette in, and you'll see it." And I think I must have shot 45, 50 minutes there
Hmm.
of different scenes, something like that. And I said, "Did you get anything out of watching it?" He goes, "Now I know what you were talking about." He says, "I saw 3 things within the first 10 minutes that shouldn't have happened."
Right. So
And
he's the kind of person who is obviously holds himself accountable,
yeah,
holds his crews accountable, and isn't afraid to be
right.
honest.
He was a city firefighter anyway. So he
Yep.
worked for the nearby city. And, but at least he came around to understand the value of something brand new that they never thought of and never seen. But having been working with AV since I was in junior high school, I used to work with videotape that was 2 inches wide. And you have to have a block and a special razor blade and a special tape
Hmm.
that you had edited together. There was no electronic editing. But I was glad when I left that he said to me, he said, "I apologize to you." So, "What are you apologizing to me for?" He goes, "I didn't allow you to be the firefighter you could be. I said, well, I made plenty of calls. He goes, no, plenty of calls. You were in the top 10% all 4 years. He says, but when you came to me, you showed me you had those cards from the state of North Carolina, not from your department, from the state of North Carolina, training in Fireman 1 and 2, well, in North Carolina, which we call it Fire 1 and 2 today, but it was just, they call it Fire 1, 2. There, hydraulics and pump and high-level rescue. And I made it up to 70 feet. I was acrophobic. I was terribly acrophobic, but I was both a victim in the Stokes, and I was also a rescuer with somebody else in that. And he says, I didn't give you the credibility that you deserve. You've done a lot more in your years down in North Carolina than some of the guys who have been here for 20 years. He says, so I was wrong. I was listening to the click. That's not what a chief is supposed to be doing. He says, I hope I didn't ruin your experience with us. I said, listen, after I got hurt, you let me be still be a volunteer as an inspector, and you sent me to the classes. I didn't have to pay for it. So I said, I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed being the inspector because that's my teaching moment. That's my teaching side. As I didn't just yell at somebody. I would see what they were doing. I'd engage them to find out why. And a lot of people, answered it with scorn. And I said, okay, you just bought yourself a ticket. He says, what do you mean? I said, I wasn't going to give you a ticket. I just wanted to give you a little warning about what you were doing. But all of a sudden, I'm the devil incarnate. I said, so here's your ticket. Go. And by the way, this one, you have to see the judge. You can't call it in. But that brought them back to the realization of there is more we should be doing for our volunteers and making sure that everybody's at the same level to the best of their ability before we start pushing names and favoritism around in this department. And he says that's going to come to an end. And it did to a certain extent because a good friend of mine still worked there for several years after I was gone. But eventually he even left because, most of the chiefs, they didn't get paid as being chiefs. They got a car with lights and sirens, but, that was it. So you had to kind of wade through the waters, the shallow waters, to find somebody who was willing to take a little nip at the worm. And I found that when you approach somebody that way, again, I'm always talking about from an educational background, but if you treat people with respect and understand that they may have some words to share and they may have some knowledge that they can share, that's how you bring good people into the department. And then it's your job, you and the training officer, to guide them on the right path as they learn to be a firefighter, or they're coming from another department, learn how we how we run our fire department and how it works, so that everybody has an open window to see how we work. There's nothing behind closed doors. Everything is out there for our workers to see and the public to see. Because if the public doesn't trust us,
well, now you're into it's a different subject, but it's something that is near and dear to my heart. I recently had an article published on, it's called the closed station door, and I was living in this town. I was working just outside of this town for a fire department, and in order to get there, as well as getting to my eye doctor, and in the summertime, the beach that I paddleboarded on, and on and on, I passed this one firehouse. I kind of felt bad for the crew initially. They were in this old, sort of almost Soviet era cinder block, unattractive, gray building. But then as I went by a few times, I realized, there was garbage in the front garden. The blinds in the front office were broken and
Bent.
right, and tattered. The paint was chipped on the door, and the door was closed, and the door was closed and closed and closed, and I think it was like 6 or 7 or 8 times, whatever it was, and I realized, wow, I passed by here now to and from 4 or 5 times. The door's always closed. Okay, and the next day I do it again. Door's closed. Because I passed 2 and 3 times a day. Coffee shop was down there as well, and I started keeping count. And I very arbitrarily stopped at 100. Absolutely unscientific, but I stopped at 100. And what I found out of that 100 was I saw the doors open 3 times. One time I saw a firefighter who was walking out of the apparatus bay to his truck. I'm guessing that was the reason why the door was open. Second time I saw a firefighter off to the side having a cigarette. Couldn't believe that we even smoke anymore, because most people don't smoke anymore, but and I'm guessing that was why that door was open that time. And then another time, it looked like a captain was just getting his gear onto his front seat at the start of a shift. So it was essentially 3 times out of 100, 3%. I never saw anybody train. I never saw anybody sitting on the front bumper, talking, chatting, being open to the public. It's a heavily traveled road. I never saw. I don't know if they had a rookie in that house or not. They maybe didn't. But the engine was never out on the apron. They were never washing the truck. They were never pulling hose from the truck. They were never, there was just no level of activity. And the garbage was always in the front garden, and the blinds were always in disarray. So it became kind of a hot button for me. Not so much for that crew specifically, but because I also want to be fair. There could have been politics happening in the background, and that particular station was actually a bit of a political volleyball in that town for a long time. They had recognized all the way back in the late '80s that this station had to be replaced. So here it is, 2022, and they were just breaking ground. So it took a long time, political. But my opinion was, if your door's closed, the public doesn't see what you're doing. If you're not open to having them see your training and see you cleaning and see you mowing that lawn and actively outside picking up garbage in the weedy old garden, if they don't see, that your captain is gone, and because I would have done it, gotten some $5 can of Walmart white paint and repainted the door on their own, all those things, then your public feels very separated from you, right? This is their building, and we are there for them ultimately. When you shut that door, you're basically saying, okay, yeah, we'll roll when you call 911, but this is our house. Right, we're doing all this stuff behind closed doors, and those closed doors, incidentally, are ones that we don't even like taking care of. Right, so we're not even showing you, the public that own this building, much respect.
Right,
we're not showing that we're training for you. So I wrote this article. There's been a little bit of fallout about that particular article, needless to say, because I think it actually hit some buttons for some people.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I think it is good. And I'm actually going to mention that that's one of the things that I did here, landing at this department. I've only been here for 4 months. I saw one of the greatest things I saw in this department so far, pulling up this morning. They had never necessarily done it before. And I pulled up this morning, and one of the bay doors was open on their own. I wasn't even on shift yet. And there were 3 firefighters standing around out front on the front bumper, shooting the breeze, waving at people as they drove by. Like, yes, that's it. That's the way it's supposed to be, right?
It's free. It doesn't cost you anything, but it buys you so much.
Oh, it's so valuable. So valuable. Absolutely. I agree.
I've said, even when I was talking with Chief Correa, talk about that most of the time, especially in our paid departments, there's a food run, whether it's going to be for lunch or dinner,
Hmm.
but they all got, I said, everybody, or you should, on the truck, or you have it in pocket, you have the promo, the trifold that you can give to the public. And,
Hmm.
or have a little sticker you can give to a child.
Always.
Always.
Yeah.
You know, I always kept stickers. Even when I was in civics, I had those stickers because I always had my
Hmm.
badge on me.
Hmm.
And I would always, well, again, since I started with teaching when I was 13, it just became natural for me to be okay to approach a little child. You know, maybe I was wearing my coat and they could see it, and sometimes I was just in regular clothes. But I always would carry some stickers. I'd always carry some pamphlets with me, and business cards. Just a business card, you know, at the fire department's business card.
Yeah.
And the smile on except for one, I guess it was a little too young, maybe just a year or something like that. But uh, the smile when you give that kid that sticker,
Hmm.
or let him hold the pamphlet to give to mommy or daddy, I said, that's worth it. That's worth everything I go through to be a firefighter,
Hmm.
because that child sees me as a firefighter, sees me with good eyes, and is impressed that I even took the time to kneel on the floor and talk with them and give them a sticker,
Hmm.
so like that.
You know,
And the
people often
parents,
ask me,
I mean, I got virtually every parent thanked me when I did that.
yeah. Well, you're in, it's really, that's just another version of an open station door, right?
Exactly.
It's about engagement. It's about recognizing that we are here for you, right? This is not, this might be my job, my profession, and for me, it's actually a vocation, not just a profession.
Right.
It's very much a calling. But we're everything from the sticker on up to having the doors open and having an actual open house too is another great thing. Yeah, people ask me often why I'm a firefighter, and there's many reasons why I'm a firefighter. But one of them I like to illustrate with something similar. Uh, I remember this one day. It had happened a few times in various ways, but this one day I'm at the firehouse. I'm in the front communications room, the comms room, and there was a knock on the door. That door faced the street. There's a knock on the door. It's a Saturday morning, and I open up the door, and it was a dad and his little boy. So we were just out for a little bike ride, and he wanted to know if he could look at the fire engines. Like, well, yeah, but you got to do me a favor. You've got to go and stand in front of one of the big doors. Stand in front of the middle big door. Okay, so they leave, and I go around and I hit that door. And for those that know, there's no other sound like an apparatus bay door opening. It's got a very specific sound. And so I hit that, and it starts going up, and it said starts to reveal the face of this kid, where now he's seeing the inside of the firehouse and all these engines and his eyes, and it's like, that's why I'm a firefighter.
Right.
For that right there. Yeah, is just that engagement with the public.
It is. And I think that's part of our back to basic that we started off with. Getting connected to the public is, other than the rescues and the fires you put out, should be should be the number one public relations goal that you set for yourself. Welcome the public, encourage the public. If there's a little fair in the area, or one of the churches, or a nonprofit is running a thing, go be there. Say, yeah, we'll take a table and we'll hand out stuff at the place. You don't realize how much public relations will go to help you in the fire service, in law enforcement, and in EMS. Okay? The kids are enthralled with our apparatus. And yes, sure, when they turn 6 and they get this other air about it, well, that may not, but you had them for a few years. And that's the key. And if you get them, and you get their parents to buy into who we are and what we do the same way, then you are growing your department right at that point. because you're
Yeah.
shining. You're coming out from behind that rickety old bay door with a lousy front door and torn curtains. You show up in a Shangri-La. That's what these kids see.
Yes.
Then they realize you. And then, more importantly, thanks to changes in public education and even private education, that the teachers are teaching our children how important our first responders are. And, and we also have to remember, and I always try to correct myself, first responders, the real first responders, are our dispatchers and call takers.
Oh, good Lord. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And we have an obligation because they basically have our lives in their hands or in their vocal cords, whichever way you want to look at it. But they are the first responders. They
Yes.
send us out next. Okay, whichever branch of us.
Well, and they hear things, before there's any level of incident stabilization. They hear those first anguished calls for help, and they have to manage that and try to draw information from that caller, and then package it into a deliverable form and have comms with us. No, dispatchers are champions of the first response community. Absolutely,
Right,
absolutely.
Right. And again, so if we can engage the public to just see who we are and what we do, and bring your kids to do it. And if you want to have a school class come, let us know. We'll set up a time with our public information officer or our chief or our assistant chief to be there with your kids and not just entertain them, but educate them through entertainment.
And that in those times, even those times when you are just kind of having a one-on-one, in a mall or on the street with that one kid and that one parent, and you're handing out just a sticker. If you think people aren't watching that, if you think they're not seeing that, you'd be wrong. They're witnessing you actually getting down, bending down to get at eye level with that little kid. You witness them being polite and courteous to that parent. They watch us. We know we're being watched, and in this age, right? We're back to this big old bad boy. In this age, we're really, really, really being watched. You shouldn't have to do it because you think you're being watched. But I think I'm talking more about when people witness that engagement. It leaves them feeling that much better about your fire department, about you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I cannot believe where the time has gone. We never even took our break. So this is going to be a long thing. I'll try to break it up maybe so I can get a couple of PSAs in, but if I don't, I don't, because this has been a great interview. And it's funny because no matter when we drifted off the topic, within a couple of minutes, it brought us right back to basics. So,
yes,
it's like you could have the nicest home built for you, but if they don't put a foundation with rebar in the cement and the boards to make sure it sets right, doesn't get wet, your house is not going to be worth anything to you without that foundation. So if we follow your thoughts about getting back to basic, but the way we've discussed it in this episode, I think that there's a lot of growth that can come from it and positive feelings. And especially if you have a lot of neighborhoods, and I'm not talking about just the nice neighborhoods. Yes, not everybody looks at firefighters with glamorous eyes. They don't like us sometimes because they connect us to law enforcement, which we don't do other than our investigators. That's what they do, law enforcement. But if we can bring back to that, we have the opportunity of showing here we are in the 21st century and a quarter way through it, that you do have good people in your community that care about you. Yes, they have their own families, their own foibles, their own debts, their own winnings, whatever. But when it comes to their job or their volunteer desire, it's to help you, to help. And there is not one firefighter I have ever met who wouldn't have helped another firefighter who needed it, whether it's on a scene or in the privacy of his home, and he needs to talk to somebody. The fact is that we are humans, but we don't hold ourselves any higher than anybody else. We just have pride. We keep pride in our job. And again, whether you're a volunteer, part pay, WUI, we all have pride, or we should, because if you don't have pride in your job as a firefighter, you might want to find another vocation for yourself.
Yeah. Or possibly even find a way, if you did have pride in your job, why is it gone?
Exactly. That's a great point.
Because it might be still in there. I heard a great analogy recently. You have a flashlight, and then slowly the flashlight goes dim and eventually goes dark. Do you throw it away? No, you take the old batteries out and you recharge it with new batteries. You can, if you did have that level of pride in what you did as a firefighter, it's probably still in there. Try to re-find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
It was a great conversation. Definitely a non-linear conversation.
Right.
So, and we were talking about basics, and then we went here and there and everywhere. So if I would be allowed one last kind of take on
Sure.
the back to basics, and my back to basics, which we got to, but also didn't get to, is really about roping in from an hour ago. Is we say this, we drop this kind of garbage term, and then we put a period on the end of that, and we don't explore it very well, right? So ask yourself if you think your department or your training division needs to get back to basics, or the fire department, fire service in general needs to get back to basics, I challenge you to define that, right? And in that definition, actually come up with moves forward in re-achieving those basics and in revisiting that building of a strong foundation. Don't just say it. You've got to examine why you've said it and what you need to do behind it.
Right. You know what? I've never done this before on the podcast, but I'm going to offer this. If you've been watching or listening to this podcast and you want to share, you don't have to share your name. I wouldn't use it, but if you want to share with us, and then I will be happy to send along to Chief Robertson, is maybe write a couple of sentences to us about how you feel about getting back to basics, what we've talked about today, opening your doors, letting the public, making a stronger connection with the public. We'd like to hear about it. And I promise you, I will forward everyone that comes in. Today we're recording on the 22nd of August. So I'll take these submissions through the 31st of August. You can send your little note or email to us at Dalmatprod. That's D as in Delta, A, L, M as in Michael, A, T as in Tango, P as in Peter, R, O, D as in David. So it's Dalmatprod at outlook.com. Okay. And in the subject matter of the email, just put making firefighting better, getting back to basics, anything that will give us a clue before we even read it, what you're talking about. And I will share those with Chief Robertson after I compile them together. So feel free to send. Yeah.
Great idea. I love that idea.
And I've never done it. Here we are going into the 9th season. Never did anything like that before. So Chief, again, we went longer than we thought, although we're longer than a regular thing, but we went without a break. And I think what that also shows is we're both always thinking. We're not just, all right, well, that's our idea on getting back to basics. And thanks for tuning in. You only had 10 minutes, so don't worry about it. we we brought it out. We talked about it, and we hope that those who are watching or listening to us understand where we're both coming from, and that all we're looking for is to make the fire service the best that it can be, and keep it humanized as well. None of us are robots. You can all answer so many calls so many times without finally piling up with you emotionally and just saying, oh, I need a break. I need a couple of days just to,
Yeah.
Get myself back together again. But I'm so glad
Yeah. Or in my case, I actually needed a couple of years, frankly.
Well,
Yeah.
look, Chief Arjuna George, you know him well.
Yep.
I do. He went through his own troubling time as a chief officer and in a department that he grew up in. And he recovered. He found his way out of the abyss and now is a great teacher and coach.
Yes, he is.
Not just how to act as a firefighter, but how to be as a person. And you need to just follow him on social media, Chief Arjuna, Arjuna. Last name is George, regular spelling George. Follow him. You will learn so much from his own journey that many of us took. Believe me, not everything is peaches and cream in the fire service, and even when you're acting outside of the service, but you're using the knowledge you gained there to try to help somebody. Remember, we're humans. We're not changing anytime soon, but we all prefer to be in a good relationship with those around our family, those around us, and most of all, the people that we take an oath. We don't just say, I want to be a firefighter. We swear an oath to protect the lives and property of the people in our community or in our sector, whatever you want to call it. But that's an oath. Most of us, most of people, not just us firefighters, but most people who take a solid oath like that don't want to break it. So we hope that part of today's message got across to you that, yes, you're still human. You may perform feats of amazing agility and wonderful saves and rescues, but you're still a human at the end of the day. Whether you go home that night, you go home the next morning, you need to decompress. You can love it. We love it. I still love the fire service. That's why I still answer, if I'm first responder on the scene, I'm going to go to work. If I have to call 911, if nobody else has done it, I'll call 911 and then I start triaging what the scene is. Should I be doing it because of my body frame and legs? No, but I see it and the adrenaline just downloads and I can't not do it. And, thank God I've never been hurt, but thanks to also now retired Chief Richard Gassaway, who teaches us about situational awareness. Whenever you're out of your apparatus or out of your vehicle, you have to keep situational awareness. You got to keep your head on like the little ducky does when you move the duck's head. It moves around and it's up and down. You need that because one miss of something SA happening could make a very poor day for you. So especially if you're responding to incidents on streets, highways, interstates. We know we're losing far too many. We just lost a long-term fire police captain in Pennsylvania, was struck by. Okay, and of course the driver scooted away, escaped. Take care of yourselves so that you can take care of the people you care about. And that's the way to put it. Thank you again, Chief, so much. This was great. And you know what? I like the free flying because it didn't force us to stay in between certain ropes. We got to open up the corral a little bit, hit some of the other issues that really boil down to keeping it back, bringing it back to the basic.
Yes, and I appreciate that. I really do.
Me too.
Very much.
All right, folks. As you know, we didn't take a break. So we want to thank Chief Dave Robertson for being with us and really sharing his wisdom, his experience in the fire service for over the 25 years. And if you're watching the video, that will be the end for you. If you're watching the audio, you know that we'll have a couple of more PSAs and then a couple more segments that come out of Inner Stuff. And that's it, folks. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed this. We hope you learn from this podcast today. And all we ask you is to stay safe, stay well, and let's make sure everyone goes home. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again soon on 5 Alarm Task Force.
Thank you.